Well, really, everything has to unfold in God's timing. So we're an advocate of getting married whenever the Lord sees
See that
fit.
subtle disclaimer there?
But if people are, they know that they have met the one and they have all of these barriers or excuses in the way, like, oh, I need to finish college first, or I need $10,000 in the bank, we would absolutely say choke those barriers and get married. You can go to college together, you can save money together, and we have no regrets. We are so happy we got married at 19 and 21.
Welcome everyone. Today we are joined by Adam and Karissa King. They are the creators of the popular Dear Young Married Couple brand and are hosts of the podcast by the same name. In this episode, the Kings share their marriage journey and the story of Dear Young Married Couple. They talk about advice they have for married couples, the importance of talking about biblical sexuality, and much more. Well, welcome to the podcast. It's so good to have you guys on and to finally meet you. I've been following from afar for a while now, and it's great to hop on here and have a chat.
Aw,
Man,
thank you, Greg.
thank you. It's an honor to be here, and we're excited to be in Australia.
Yeah.
Is this your first podcast with Aussie?
Maybe so.
I mean, I'm not really Aussie. I guess I am Aussie.
I think so.
I'm an American Australian citizen. I'm a dual citizen.
You're close
so
enough.
I do somewhat count.
There you go.
It is the first time.
Yeah. But we've definitely admired the Hacka podcast from afar, and we really appreciate what you're doing and the traction that it's gained. You know, it's impacting a lot of people. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think some of the stuff that we deal with just because of the guests that I've had, not necessarily my inclination, but I like to just follow wherever the guest leads us, has kind of dovetailed a little bit with what you guys do when it comes to mental health and other things like that. But yeah, I've had a number of the audience members. I do every once in a while, maybe every 6 months or so. Hey, what are some guests that you guys would be interested in having on the podcast? And always, every time you guys pop up, you're one of the
Aw.
responses. So you got
Well, thank you, all you people.
Aw, thank you.
But the person that actually is the one that we owe to this actually taking place is my wife. She said, you've got to have them on.
Yay.
She follows you guys, enjoys your content and
So
what you guys
sweet.
are about. So yeah, it's
Man.
awesome.
Tell her much
Awesome
love
having you
from
on.
us.
She actually wanted to be on, but she's doing the school run. So
Aw.
yeah,
We get it.
we would have tried to sneak her on here, but anyway. So I like to start all these conversations by the audience getting to know the guests a little bit. You don't have to go into great detail, but would you mind sharing a little bit about your story, about your background, how you all met, that sort of thing?
Yeah, sure. So we were both lived in California. We still do live in California. And the first time we met is actually at a Bible quizzing tournament where Karissa absolutely just spanked our team. It wasn't even kind, you know.
Okay.
But I was, I think, how old was I? Like 12?
And
you were 10?
I was 13, so you were 15.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, well, I wanted to blame it on my juvenile brain, but no, that was the first time, and it's hilarious because my mom has a video of us getting beat really bad by this team from Redding, California. And I remember not even really looking at her. I was just kind of angry, like this blonde-headed girl just decimated us. So that was my first exposure to Karissa Horton at that time. And then she moved back. She actually moved to our church a little while later. And we became friends. That was right around 14.
Yeah. So we started dating when I had just turned 17. Adam had just turned 19. And he hit the road a couple months after we started dating to evangelize. And so
with my parents.
Yep. His whole family hit the road. And so our 2 years of dating were almost entirely long distance. And then we got married at 19 and 21.
Yeah, it was quite an interesting transition too. Because actually before then, it was funny that the one thing that her dad said that I needed to have was a job and a car. and I lost both of them in like
Oh no.
3 months, like before our marriage. Or not 3
Before
months.
proposal.
Yeah, before proposal. We were all gearing up, and I actually got in a really bad car wreck and almost died. And that changed my life drastically. And then fast forward, we got married. I got a car.
He got a
I
car
got a
before we
job
got
again.
married.
And yeah, then the rest is kind of history. I guess it all is history here.
Yeah. So we've been married 17 years now.
17.
You guys have us by 2 years. We just celebrated 15.
Congrats.
So we'll be chasing you for the rest of our lives, I guess.
Yeah, until we kick the can.
Same to you guys. So you guys are involved in Bible because I was as well growing up.
Right
I
on.
grew up in Missouri. So I was in the
Okay.
Missouri district and was there from like age 5 or 6 to 17.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, we went in for a long
Such
haul.
a good experience.
Totally.
Oh, yeah. So you mentioned there that you guys got married at 19 and 21.
Mhm.
When you talk to couples or talk about marriage and relationships, is that something that you advocate for, as in getting married a bit younger? Or do you kind of like stay away from that and give general advice when it comes to age?
Well, really, everything has to unfold in God's timing. So we're an advocate of getting married whenever the Lord sees
See
fit.
that subtle disclaimer
Yeah.
there?
But if people are, they know that they have met the one and they have all of these barriers or excuses in the way, like, oh, I need to finish college first, or I need $10,000 in the bank, we would absolutely say choke those barriers and get married. You can go to college together, you can save money together, and we have no regrets. We are so happy we got married at 19 and 21.
Yeah, just to kind of echo what she's saying, I went back to college. So we got married. I was actually a professional golf caddy at Bandon Dunes, which was
Wow.
a dream job.
Yeah.
And that was the job that I had. And then I decided, God was taking me in a different direction, and I probably needed school to fulfill that calling. And so I went back to school at 25. So a lot of our earlier years were in college. I was getting my associates and then bachelor's and then eventually my master's, and Karissa got all of her degrees. So, and she's now working on her doctorate, but for a lot of the time we were in school. And I can't imagine, like we hear this all the time with counseling people, I can't imagine waiting 5 years, 6 years while trying to date someone to get married, because
Yeah.
passion takes over, and for a lot of people, and they have a very difficult time living out their moral values with such a long relationship, especially if they know. I tell people, I'd rather do the hard thing of going through school with a beautiful person that I admire, a spouse that can help me and hold me in all the difficulties that school offers, than do it all by myself, then have everything on hold. I think that being married actually helped my studies, because now I had a built-in editor,
But truly, it eliminates the distraction of the constant tension and pull away from your
Sexual
studies. Not just sexual tension, but just the pull away from your studies, because you're trying to date and you're trying to impress and you're trying to make time for, and now you have built-in time together. You still have to be intentional, but you're around each other much more when you're married and living together.
Man, some of my favorite times were sitting in a coffee shop, no kids, super poor, but we could afford coffee. And we'd go sit in a coffee shop side by side for like 4 hours, and I'd be working on a coding class, or I'd be working on, my philosophy and writing a paper. And that's amazing. That's beautiful. Like, we enjoyed it. So looking back, we saw it as a benefit to going through school together. And I don't see very many pros to waiting if you know that this is the person I want to be with for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I completely agree, which is why I asked the questions. If anyone from our youth is listening to the podcast, they've heard me say it a few times when they've asked me to address the young people. Steph and I, we got married at 20, And, we were together
Mhm.
for like 2 years before that, which
Yep.
is not a short time when you're that
Right.
young.
Mm.
Yep.
And we
Nope.
knew like I'd moved country. So why date for like 2, 3 more years before,
Yeah.
committing to each other for life? And like, as you said, these challenges that you're facing, it's so much better to go. This is what my wife says all the time. It's so much better to be doing it together as
Yep.
opposed to separately and not knowing, okay, well, I think I'm going to marry them. I think this is going to happen, but I'm
Mhm.
not totally sure. And yeah, like you go through school together, you get
Yeah.
first car together, you get your first house. Oh, you have so many memories together
Mhm.
that we wouldn't
Absolutely.
have if, especially being committed Christians, we
Yeah.
wouldn't have been able to
Right.
travel together, wouldn't have been able to do a number of things until we were able to get married. So, yeah,
You're
I definitely
preaching.
encourage that.
Amen.
Amen. We'd back you up 100%.
I'm glad. Well, I like to know the origins of the of I guess your brand. Is that the way you would phrase it, dear young married
Mhm.
couple, which so many people have seen and been impacted by. So obviously, you guys got married. You're growing in your relationship and in your marriage together. At what point
Mm.
did you decide to do this? Did you fall into it? Would you mind sharing a little bit of your story in regards to
Sure.
this?
Yeah. So, about 3 years into marriage, I graduated with my master's in marriage and family therapy. And because of that, a lot of marriage books and marriage studies came across our desks, and we had a lot of chats about marriage. We were ministerial counselors at the time, youth pastoring and helping youth, but also parents and a church that had gone through a really big uh, broken heartache ridden time of the pastor having fallen into sexual sin. And so that brought a lot of opportunities to walk alongside people and nurture people's hearts. So there was a lot of ministerial counseling that we were doing at the time. And then fast forward a few years, we started getting requests to speak at marriage events. And so we were just studying a lot more because of those requests. And we were on a backpacking trip one day, and this was before having kiddos, but we were just casting vision for our lives and talking about our passion to serve married couples. And we said, what if we, because at the time we had only been married a handful of years, and we said, what if we curated marriage advice from experts, pastors, people in the field, and brought it to the people? And it could be a book. It could be called Dear Young Married Couple. And we'll just be, like a student and share what we're learning with the people. And we are like, let's do it. So we start writing this book, and we realize if we're going to write a book and actually, and people actually want to read it, it's actually going to have to be a brand first. So that's when we said, let's start an Instagram and a brand, and actually provide these resources before there's ever a book. So that's when we started sharing on Instagram. And then the podcast came along several years later in 2020, right before the pandemic, actually.
Mm.
And so it was kind of fortuitous because then people were kind of locked down a couple months
Mhm.
after we started the podcast and started listening to all the episodes. And so that was really neat to see that take off. And now I would say most people that say thank you for the resources you put out there, most of them listen to the podcast rather
Okay.
than say something about Instagram or the card decks
Mhm.
or anything else. It's usually like, oh, I listened to that episode.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. Media is just so up and down depending on the changes that are made in the
So
background and
true.
whatever,
Right.
like uh I'll routinely get frustrated. It's like these people are following, they like want the content, that's why they follow, and then
Uh-huh.
you're putting it out to like 4% of the
Yeah,
people who actually
Yep.
follow.
absolutely.
So I
Yeah.
always, and then I just remind myself, and I'm sure it's very similar for you guys. The only reason the socials that exist is for the podcast. Like I couldn't care less if you follow me on socials, if you listen, or if
Sure.
you watch, because that's where the impact's going to take place in your life,
Mm,
Yep.
and that content where we're connecting, similar to you guys. Like the story of the podcast is just trying to connect ministry with people throughout the week. And I had the opportunity to, through my job, through what I do for work, working here at the Pentecostals of Sydney, I have the opportunity to meet amazing people, amazing men and women of God,
That's awesome.
sharing their story with people,
Yeah.
But that's really cool how you guys started. So, how did the first book go when you put it out?
Well, it's going.
Yeah. We're writing it right
not
now.
Yet. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the
I
funny
thought
thing.
maybe I missed it because it was all the way back at the beginning of the story.
We just got so busy.
Yeah.
We never wrote the book. So actually this year's one of the goals, big initiatives for this year, actually right before we got on with you, we were writing a chapter on marriage and stuff.
Marriage and stuff.
Marriage and stuff.
Yeah.
Specifically
I was
on
gonna jump off a
how
bridge
to
and-
initiate sex.
Yeah. Solomon's instructions.
It's so hard to write. Like I had someone, an organization reached out to me to ask me to help with a writing project. And so I'm not writing a full book, which I guess made it even harder because it wasn't
Okay.
necessarily my idea. It was like their idea and I was working with it. But I've got more news coming out of that soon, but I only had to write like maybe 3 chapters or so.
Nice.
And it is so hard. Like you sit down, I write sermons all the time. I do, I'm constantly writing, constantly putting stuff out. But it's so different when you're putting it down for a book. I don't know what it is, if it's mental, but it just feels so different.
Yeah. I think it's difficult just because you look at it as such a permanent thing. You kind of put that gravitas on it and you're like, oh, is this the best version of what I'm putting out? And so you want to question yourself and it's never good enough.
Right.
So you have to get over that and say, will this bless this couple that I'm thinking of in my head? Will this move the needle for them if they read this right now?
Yeah.
So
awesome.
That's kind of what I try to keep myself grounded,
I'm sure you guys have had this question a number of times, but if you were to speak to a young married couple, what would be, I guess, your go-to advice if you needed to condense it down? What would you guys say to them?
In what aspect of marriage?
I guess as they're just getting started in their married life, what advice would you give as far as like setting that foundation when it comes to establishing a relationship beyond a dating relationship?
It's great because we actually ask this question at the end of all of our podcasts. Fill in the blank, dear young married couple. So I'll do that. Dear young married couple, your marriage is a sanctification journey. And you will have seasons where you go through pain and you will feel stretched. You will be at odds at times, and all the while, it is making you more whole, more holy. You're becoming more like Christ because of your marriage covenant. So remember that sanctification is not an all-at-once thing. It is a journey.
Well, there you go. There's your Instagram clip.
That's the only reason I asked the question. Just for the
there
clip.
you go.
I don't really care.
That shifted. That really comes from Gary Thomas's book, Sacred Marriage. And of course, it's the Bible's first. But that advice really did help me because I saw this as an other trying to make me more like her. And I was like, no, I'm like me, And that I think that's the world's view of partnership is they look for compatibility. So that means that, I'm going to find this perfect person that can so fit into my life in such a way that they don't demand me to change anything about me. And I'm going to sleep with that person. I'm going to do all the things. We're going to try to be a best friend, but then also don't change me. And that's just not realistic. Anything that is close to you will change as a result of being with you. And so I think that if we can have a godly view of marriage that is Christ-centered, Christ came so that we could have life, and that's a process. I mean, of course, justification, but I'm talking about sanctification. I think that if we can see marriage through the lens of sanctification, God's design to make you more like him,
Mhm.
then when she asks you to do something that's slightly different than how you would do it, you can see this not as a unreasonable request, but more along the lines of an opportunity to be long-suffering, to
Mm.
be gentle, to be kind, to exhibit love, the character traits of, the fruit of the Spirit. I think that would really keep us all better, not just better marriages, but better Christians. So
Mhm.
but that is the framework from which I think that really marriage becomes a holy thing rather than just a thing of necessity.
It's good.
Yeah, I love that point you made about not just looking for compatibility. It's like,
Mm,
you're two separate lives and you're just coming together and now
yep.
you're married. And
Yep.
then I'm not going to change. She's not going to change. And we're just going to walk through life because we're just perfectly compatible with each other. He likes what I like,
Yep.
so on and so forth. We're not going to share bank accounts. We're gonna do our own thing, but be married at the same as well. And it's
Yeah.
just not like that, And I think
Mhm.
going back to the original uh, question I asked you about age, I think that's what really helps because if you are younger, you're sort of becoming the adult. Like I wasn't fully
Hmm.
out there, a complete adult when we got married, but then
Yeah.
over time, I'm becoming the man that I'm going to become, and that's like a lot of that. Obviously, your parents have a lot to do with that, but
Hmm.
my wife does too. Because of
Yeah.
the input that she had in those developing years of our marriage.
Mm. So
It's
true.
good.
I guess to answer that question from my perspective of what I would say, especially to my younger self, I would say to treat marriage like anything else that you like getting into. So like I'm kind of one of those people who just love something a lot. And so I'll just pursue it. So if I like golf, like I do right now, I'm just gonna throw myself at this thing and really try to be the best I can at it. Same thing with fly fishing, or like whatever all the other things I've done in my life. I'm gonna build canoes. Like I just go like all in and learn everything I can. And it's funny is I didn't really do that. I didn't think of this as a new thing to
Mm.
learn. And so I wish that I would have got tools on board where, I know what to do when Karissa doesn't agree with me or how to softly ask for something that I want her to change. Or when it is an argument and it's blowing up. Ooh, here are the protocols that you need to really watch out for or to do in those heightened moments so you don't make things worse.
Mm,
And so those are all things you learn over time, hopefully. Not everybody learns these things,
Yeah.
but good communication tactics, especially like in a premarital program or from a counselor, if we would have done that in the first couple years, we could have saved ourselves so much pain
Oh
and
yeah.
suffering.
Yep.
So that's what I would suggest. Pursue it. Read some books. Go get some mentors or a therapist, counselor that's has your same values and worldview, and then really dive in and treat this as a thing to learn and to discover rather than just like, take it as like a whatever, now we're together, and just go from
yeah.
there.
Yeah, listen to Dear Young Married Couple. That will help you out. At least that'll give you some very good, solid guidance when it comes to those beginning stages for sure. I mean, because you don't know, and especially if you come from a family where the marriage that was emulated for you
Hmm.
growing up wasn't good, then you don't have much of a baseline to start with. You actually have
Yeah.
probably a negative um, baseline because
Right.
you're
Yeah.
struggling with what you saw your parents go through and oh, this is how my dad always talked to my mom, and then you're like, oh wait, well that's not actually the right way because they're not divorced. So uh,
Right.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know
But at the same time though, like my mom and dad had a fabulous relationship. Looking back, I didn't see them yelling at each other, arguing, and if they did, they didn't yell, but if they had a disagreement, they'd come back and apologize. All those things were really good. They presented very well in front of us. Um, but this person that I'm sitting next to is way different from my mom and dad.
Oh,
Or
yeah.
I'm different from my dad, and she's way different. And so the things that Karissa did were like, whoa, shocking. And I didn't know how to handle it. Like, you need to submit, lady. I said something, and so I had a misunderstanding of submission and how, like I said, one of the things I told her from the very beginning, I said, Chris, I want somebody to stand beside me and not behind me. Until she stood next to me and disagreed with where we were going, you're not supposed to do that. So yeah, like your spouse is going to be, even in a different home, you have a different culture already.
Right. Even if you both come from Christian homes, good homes, healthy homes, intact homes, you're still going to have a difference in culture. So you have to learn your new family culture with each other and make sure it aligns with the culture of Scripture.
So you guys deal in this space, and you talk with people, and you do marriage counseling as well. I'm not sure if this is too open-ended, but are there some things that you see that cause married couples, especially Christian married couples, from living a fulfilled married life? What are some things, you don't have to go into great detail, but if you want to highlight a couple of things here or there that you've seen over the years that are almost like roadblocks or hindrances to them really having that fulfilled married life that we all want?
Yeah.
That's a very big question, brother.
It is.
Yes, there are lots. And it's funny, maybe because of my training, but I almost always want to ask questions after I hear things like that and say, okay, what areas, are we talking about? Are we talking about theological roadblocks? Are we talking about sexual roadblocks? Are we talking about communication roadblocks? Because like a lot of couples have probably roadblocks in each area.
Right.
The most common that we see is either communication, and I can explain that, or like a lot of roadblocks, sexual roadblocks, misunderstandings, or they never talked about it.
Yeah.
So learning to put language on stuff and to have like mental systems to look at things and understand them, I think that's probably been the biggest key for the people we've worked with. What about, what would you say?
I would agree. In terms of who we've worked with, I mean, we love it when we get couples who come into counseling because they just want to grow. It's some of our favorite work, but unfortunately,
and we have a lot of them.
Yes.
But they come in like this.
Yes. Unfortunately, most of those couples start in a place where they're very broken, very hurt, very betrayed. A lot of the couples that come to us, they're experiencing broken trust. And so lack of trust stems from not feeling fully known and or fully loved. Sometimes they feel known but not loved. Sometimes they feel loved but not known. And that prompts them to put barriers up and to keep secrets. And secrets are the buffer to intimacy. So if there are secrets in the relationship, and that's going to put blockers between your intimate connection with each other, that's going to cause you to feel less fulfilled. You might have a good life, but you might be less fulfilled in your marriage. And then, of course, once those secrets get revealed, all hell breaks loose and everything comes tumbling down. So I would say a lot of times we find those couples in our counseling office or online office in disarray because of those sexual barriers that were a symptom of the secrets that were kept and the unmet longings that they had to be known and loved.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. Communication and vulnerability is so important. I want to get to this question because I think in conversation, just in the general conversation, you guys are throwing out words that might seem taboo at times, like the chapter you're working on currently, or different things. Like if you go on your Instagram page, you'll have short form content that will address specific things that people tend to avoid, right? Like,
can you
you're
enlighten us what you're talking about?
Sex. They don't like talking about that. anything related to it.
Yeah.
Just
You can
wanted you to
allude to
say
it, but yeah, it's like, get him red faced. Get him.
Yeah,
I'm a
exactly.
Puritan, bro. I grew up in a very
Is that why you wear the
conservative.
beard? He's like, I
Yes,
just
that's
don't want
right.
to share that.
This is my rebellion against
Oh, come on, I love
my
it.
childhood church.
Yeah, just like Jesus.
Yeah, love the doctrine, but this is my protest. But no, I'm just kidding. You guys, you stepped into this ministry, and God is using you in wonderful ways, but you're also dealing with things that, as I said, seem to be off limits or maybe even taboo, things that um, aren't really talked about in church circles per se, at least in the apostolic church, where a lot of your ministry takes place. Um, how have you found the journey so far in what you guys are doing and what you're communicating and the feedback that you're receiving from that? And let's go there, and then I'll have a follow up after that.
Yeah.
Sure.
So we love it. We love the journey. It's amazing. It's difficult for a lot of the people that we're reaching because when we post something that is taboo in their people's minds, we don't get a resounding like woohoo, and lots of comments. Just because people don't want to have their name next to something like, I love this advice, we're going to try it tonight. It's just not going to happen. And I think that's the difficulty behind it. But when we see it DM'd a whole bunch of times to people, then we know like, hey, this message matters. So, but like, as we're opening this kind of up, we want to, above all, we're not trying to be countercultural.
Yeah.
We're trying to give people insight to what the Bible is saying and maybe what we've missed.
Yeah.
So it's not that we're trying to be taboo just for the reason of being taboo. What we're trying to do is give people, round out this, like you said, the Puritan, right? Round out this swing we've had to like what we think is holiness. And sometimes God has to reveal things that, oh, wait, hold on, I've maybe done this, but maybe this isn't exactly what God wanted or meant by this.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to consider the whole scripture of God. All scripture is given by inspiration of God, even Song of Solomon. And so what we've had to do is be very, very careful. But the Bible is way more forward than many of our ministers or even lay people. Like Song of Solomon is in Proverbs and is extremely forthright in what it teaches around sexuality and the joys and beauty of intimacy. But we just don't go there because it's maybe not popular to preach on a Sunday morning. So because of that, I think people have come away with the idea of that's just something that God tolerates rather than what God celebrates. So what we're trying to do delicately is shine that light, that spotlight on, this is God's plan.
Mm-hmm.
God came up with sex. This was his idea, and he said it was very good. And so whenever we as humans, try to make something that God called good, and we try to taint that or corrupt that, anytime you corrupt a good, it becomes sin. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to just walk that delicate line and expose, hey, maybe this is something that we have overcompensated with. And we're just trying to do that with wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with everything Adam said. It's been, we love it. It's definitely fun to not only walk in our own calling, but to see the impact that it makes, and to see people come out of the woodwork saying, man, if I only had this when we first got married, or I'm so thankful we've had this since we've got married, or we've followed these principles from your podcast or resources since premarital, and it's made this impact in our marriage. Like, that is definitely encouraging to see the the tides shift a bit, not because we're trying to be countercultural, but because we see people grasping God's intent for marriage and sexuality and eroticism and passion within a marriage.
And this also comes from our deficiency, just to be clear.
Yes.
Like most people we survey, we do a lot the Eros seminars all over the US. And we've asked this question, hey, how many of you had homes that taught that sex was a good, beautiful gift from God?
To be celebrated
in the covenant of marriage.
Yeah.
And there's probably
there would be hardly any.
There's
less
less
than
than
10%.
10%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we asked like how many people were taught that it was like bad, that sex was bad. And we probably have like 20%. How many of you had one talk about sex with your parents when it was like too late? You know, like you were in high school and they're like, we're going to have the sex talk, you know, and that's actually a pretty big, this is US. So, you know, we haven't surveyed Australia here, but you know, that's probably like 30%. And then a big percent, like 40% is just complete silence.
Yeah, you just don't talk about it.
So that's the community of people that we're serving. And so we're just trying to now offer them, you know, kind of some of the stuff that we've learned being in the field, working in the field, seeing the research, and trying to integrate science and theology. So be true integrationists in that way.
And I would say we've definitely gotten some tiny remnants of negative feedback.
Yep.
But it's by far and large super positive feedback. And it's funny, the naysayers don't actually come and say it to our face. They'll either go to our pastor, which it's hilarious because our pastor is like, okay, like he really endorses what we do, and we're submitted, so like that's not an issue. But it's funny, they'll go to our pastor if they have an issue with something we've posted, or they'll post something publicly. Like I'm just thinking of recently, someone started this series of like basically challenging the title of our conference, and so like they'll do something like that, and as long as we don't respond to it and give it, you know, more fodder than it needs, it just dies. So it's okay. Like we're not worried about the negative feedback. And if there's negative feedback that's important for us to pay attention to, by all means, like we want to hear that.
If it's a serious concern, biblically reasoned, I think it'd be foolish for us to ignore it.
Sure.
Because above all, I think what we really want to be is genuine Christians that are seeking truth, right?
Right.
We're on the side of truth. So we want to hear Jesus's words and voice. So I think that's our biggest, we're figuring this out too. We're creating this as we go as well. It's not all that we got it figured out and we're going to stick by, you know, what we said. If we're wrong, we're wrong. But everybody's, I think, entitled to learn.
Yeah.
But we haven't really had very many of those, thankfully, because we've tried to be very careful and researched as we bring things out and talk about things.
And prayerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you guys are kind of groundbreaking when it comes to this, as far as in the apostolic world, in our circles. I didn't know about anything like this when I was younger, and you know, you had your marriage conferences. That was all separate, like, you know, it wasn't open for anybody. It's for married couples. And you have no idea what they discussed, and maybe they were talking about some of the stuff, who knows? But you know, a lot of that I think had to do with like communication and dynamics and that sort of stuff.
Right.
But I think it's important, obviously, which is why I wanted you guys on the podcast and expose your ministry to my audience, because I feel like it is important for young people, and not just for young people. If you've been married for a number of years and you're struggling and you're hitting these roadblocks in your marriage, in your relationship, and you're not understanding why, you know, maybe it has to do with a lot of these things that just wasn't discussed. Like you said, the percentages tell the story. And I mean, I think for me growing up in the apostolic church, if they didn't talk about sex at all. If they did, it was about purity. And if it wasn't about purity, then it was about pornography. Like those are the three things that they talked about, and that was it. and growing up, and so it was never really looked at positively, right? When
Yep.
when it was addressed by the church, it was
Yeah.
always looked at as something, okay, you need to stay away from this. You know, like they'll say, you know, sex is beautiful, it's great for marriage, and then that's kind of the end of it. And then you move
Yeah.
on to, okay, but save it for marriage. Within marriage, it's great. Outside of marriage, it's evil, it's horrible, and so on.
Yep.
And then you take your purity pledge and so on and so
Right.
forth.
And none of
I
that
think,
is theologically wrong. We're just missing an opportunity to celebrate sex as God's good gift.
mm, yeah. And along the same lines is, uh, again, I guess getting back to a comment we made at the beginning is why there is this struggle within young relationships, because not only do they feel like everything has to be perfectly in line for them to get married, number one,
Mm-hmm.
but then number two, they're not really getting proper guidance about, you know, how to save themselves for marriage, or, you know, why it's so important to keep this within the bounds of marriage. And so it is just a real struggle.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
for sure.
It's so true.
So we talked about sort of the areas that you're in currently. Are there other areas that you're looking at? I know you're talking about the book and working on that, but are there other ideas or concepts that you're wanting to bring out that you guys are going to be looking at in the near
Hmm.
future?
Yes. So, as far as this year, our primary initiatives have to do with getting the book out, which is going to be called Dear Young Married Couple. And then we're working on a broken trust course. So it's a course for when trust has been broken in the marriage and the pastor or counselor doesn't quite know where to start with the couple. They'll have a roadmap, and we're going to be giving that to pastors and counselors for free. And so it'll have a track for the person who broke trust and a track for the spouse and work that they can do jointly. So that's really exciting. We've been doing a lot of work on that. And then one of our most recent interests, even though it's been an interest for a long time, but we've taken action on it, is working with power couples. That's the kind of the title we've given it. So this will be our second annual Power Couples Retreat in Cancun, and we haven't advertised it. It's just something that we've thrown out a handful of invitations to keep it really small and intimate. And it's couples who are growing, who are jointly interested in making an impact in the kingdom, whether through business and or ministry, and generally that's both. And so it's really fun to come alongside those couples as peers and brainstorm together and pour into each other's lives. So that's been, I think, a direction that I'm really excited about.
Yeah, and we have our mentor and coach that comes and helps us host
Mhm.
those. Those are amazing.
Yeah.
Another, we have way too many things in the pipeline, but
Yeah.
it's seriously true. But I'm really working hard on a addictions course.
Mhm.
Just because this is such a big deal right now.
Mhm.
The church is kind of late, I think, in supporting young men and having those conversations with young men, or I should say fathers,
Mm.
that to help them navigate their sexuality with a phone in their pocket. It's becoming increasingly difficult with all the advances in technology. And so it's almost something I didn't have to deal with when I was a kid. I had sexual things around me, but I didn't have that temptation 100% in my pocket till a lot later. So I'm really passionate about that. And with addiction, and this is like goes together with addiction. Addiction really is just a symptom.
Mhm.
And if you really are have a growth mindset, getting through addiction is an effect of growth.
Mhm.
So I really love the idea of talking to Christian men and younger men that have a desire to grow and to become, and not just simply like stopping something. It's so much more than just stopping something. It's about becoming someone, and helping people with those patterns, because success leaves clues, right? There's lots of people that are great around us. So helping them define for themselves what needs to change and how to change it, and what an incredible day looks like, and how to spot what their calling is, and all those things. So building that, it's probably going to take form later half of this year, but I'm really excited about working on that. That, if you can't tell, that fires me up.
Oh yeah, no, that was awesome, and the perspective that you bring there is awesome. And I think that would really break through to young men and to dads as well. That it's not just about stopping something; it's about growing, becoming who God
Mhm.
wants you to be, beyond what you're dealing with or what you're
Yep.
going through at the moment.
Amen.
This has been a great conversation. It's been awesome having you guys on, and so glad you were able to make the time to hop on here and talk to my audience here on the podcast. And we're so grateful for it. I do like to give our guests the opportunity to close out our time together on the pod. So I'll leave it to you, whoever wants to go first, but I'll give you both the opportunity to share a closing word with the audience here. And thank you again so much for your time here today.
Oh, thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm on the hot seat. I think, and this is so simple, but to love Jesus.
Mm.
If we can seek him first, all these things will be added.
Mm.
We strive for so many things, and we forget that simple love can define so much of our life. And we know that when we exude love, so much changed when I sought a real relationship with Jesus, to try to hear his voice, to try to understand what he wants from me, to really pursue him like I would pursue a spouse. And I really developed that, I think, and it's developing. But with that love of Jesus, it becomes a love for people.
Yeah.
And when you have a love for people, that expands to the love for your family and a love. And so it doesn't stay confined to one area. That love of Jesus expands to everything and touches everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so the words of Jesus that like rings in my ears is, they will know you are my disciples for the love that you show one to another. And I would challenge people to ask themselves, does my marriage have that love? Can people look at my marriage and tell that I'm a disciple of Christ?
Mm.
Could they look at my parenting and decide that I'm a disciple of Christ? Can they see my friendships and easily conclude that I'm a disciple of Christ? And if I can emulate those aspects like gentle and kindness and long-suffering and vaunting not yourself, and like if I can do all those things that charity does, I think that you're going to be very successful in life, but more importantly, you're going to have wonderful, incredible relationships and make a difference in a lot of people's lives.
Amen. I'll just piggyback on that. And in that vein, remember that your spouse is first and foremost a child of God, and therefore is your brother or sister in Christ. So if you are treating your spouse as somebody that's less than, and you're treating them in a way that Christ would not treat his own children, then you're not fulfilling that John 13:35 command, that people will know you're my disciples by the love that you show one to another. And so if you can keep that filter on when you are deciding how to respond to your spouse, or your kids, or your friends, or those you serve in ministry, or those you serve in your place of work, then you will treat them with the love and care and tenderness that God would want his own children to be treated with. And that starts in your marriage.